controversy. You drop the album, all of a sudden it's beefing, Nussie and Boosie.
Well,
and
that's the streets.
You know?
That's the streets, and that was my plan.
Baton Rouge representing.
Go ahead.
You ready? Oh, what's up, man? I'm Nussie. Dope Celebrity Records, Baton Rouge representing. Mr. Really be doing them things. Up 5-0. All the rumors you heard is true.
Everybody knows it. They just need to stop. Y'all need to stop.
When Nussie dissed Boosie, he probably didn't think it'd be the last thing he ever did. But in Baton Rouge, rap beefs don't just play out on wax, they spill into the streets. And this one, it turned deadly.
Like I say, I'm a thinker. I wanted to get in the rap game. So I'm like, well, what the could I do? I said, I tell you what, if you listen to my rhymes, I keep it gangster, but I crack a lot of jokes in my rhymes.
Boosie wasn't just some rapper. He was deeply rooted in the streets, with real pull behind the mic. Nussie, hungry for a come-up, started throwing shots in his music. But what started as lyrical smoke turned into real tension, fast.
So I did a song called The Dumb Way. I took a shot at him, I had said some stuff about him. So the streets pushed it, you know. I'm king of the street guys, you know what I'm saying? That's why all this thing had to come to a head because...
Next thing the city knew, Nussie was dead. Rumors of a bounty, a teenage hitman, and Boosie possibly pulling the strings had the streets buzzing, and the courtroom watching. This is the story of how dissing Boosie nearly led to a death sentence. Let's get straight to it.
The man known as the streets of Nussie was shot dead in Baton Rouge. Police say Chris Jackson, known by his rap name as Nussie, was murdered last night in the Mid-City area of Baton Rouge. His body was found on America Street.
If you know anything about Louisiana street rap, you've probably heard the name Chris Nussie Jackson. And if you've heard that name, you already know his story didn't end well. This wasn't just a rap beef for clout or YouTube views. This was real-life Baton Rouge drama that spiraled into murder, trials, death penalties, and street legends. And right at the center of it all, Lil Boosie. Back in the late 2000s, Baton Rouge was hot. And I don't just mean the weather. The streets were buzzing with talent, tension, and territorial heat. Boosie was already becoming a legend, dropping raw tracks that had the hood on fire. But then came Nussie. And Nussie wasn't just another local rapper trying to eat. He was bold, loud, disrespectful, and he came straight at Boosie's neck.
Rapping. And he like, what's up, Nussie, man? And when he said it, everybody fell out laughing. And I said, you know what? I'm doing it. So that's how Nussie Bad came about. My partner Pete, we cracking a joke about it. You know, it wasn't nothing to try to offend nobody or nothing like that or to come up. It was like...
Let's be clear. Nussie wasn't scared of Boosie. In fact, he welcomed the smoke. He dropped diss tracks. He threw shots in interviews. He mocked Boosie's image, his name, and his crew. This wasn't subliminal. It was direct. One diss track in particular, Nussie Badazz, was basically him stealing Boosie's name and flipping it into a joke. That kind of move, it doesn't just start beef, it sets off war.
Well, it started from like the bad album I dropped. It didn't really start from that. That's where the streets started pushing it from, you know. Bad just a marketing scheme.
Boosie clapped back too. One of the most infamous responses was his track, What Goes Up Must Come Down, which many fans believe was aimed squarely at Nussie. The title alone sounded like a threat, a warning that anybody who got too bold was bound to fall. And in the streets of Baton Rouge, words like that don't just live on a song. They echo through neighborhoods, they light up phone calls, they get passed around like hit lists. The tension between Boosie and Nussie got so deep that it stopped being about music. This wasn't about bars or beats anymore. This was personal. Real street politics started mixing with the rap game. And when that happens, there's usually no clean way out.
Yo, dog, now, you gonna cry. You know y'all love it. You gonna cry. You gonna cry. Oh, you gonna cry. You put that on the couch still.
People in Baton Rouge started noticing weird stuff. Unmarked cars rolling slowly. Nussie showing up in places with heavy security. Rumors floating around that Boosie had put $30,000 on Nussie's head, allegedly. There's no paperwork proving it, but the word on the streets, Boosie had enough of the disrespect and wanted it handled. And on February 9th, 2009, Nussie was found dead, shot in the head inside a Baton Rouge home, just like that.
33-year-old rapper was on the fast track to stardom before police found him dead.
This was the scene last night when police found the Baton Rouge rapper shot to death inside a home in the 2300 block of America Street.
No warning, no call-out, no final diss track, just a lifeless body in a pool of blood. And whether it was revenge, street justice, or something even deeper, the world started pointing fingers, and a lot of those fingers were aimed straight at Boosie. Now let's talk about the wildest part of this whole story. Marlo Mike Louding. If you thought the Boosie Nussie beef was intense, wait until you hear about the young dude who got caught in the middle of it all, or depending on who you ask, became the muscle behind it. Marlo Mike wasn't some seasoned OG. He wasn't a street veteran. Nah, this kid was 16 years old when his name started popping up in connection with murders. Not one, not two, but a string of them. Let that sink in. At 16, most kids are worried about school, sports, or maybe getting a car. Marlo? He was allegedly catching bodies. 9 of them, if you believe his later confessions. The streets called him a teen hitman. Cops said he was a cold-hearted shooter, a rogue gunman. One detective even described him as being haunted by voices in his head, voices telling him to kill. It sounds unreal, like something straight out of a horror movie. But this was real life, real victims, real funerals. And the craziest part, he was allegedly Boosie's go-to.
Well, little Boosie hired a hitman to another man after hearing his life was in danger. Opening statements began yesterday in the first-degree trial of little Boosie, whose real name is Torrance Hack.
According to prosecutors, Marlo Mike was the one who pulled the trigger on Terry Boyd, another Baton Rouge figure, and they said Boosie was the one who ordered the hit. The price? Just $2,800. That's what Marlo reportedly told investigators. He said Boosie gave him the money to do the job.
Initially, he confessed and told the prosecutors, as well as the police, that Boosie paid him to kill these people.
But it wasn't just about what Marlo said. It was what he did after. 2 weeks after the Boyd hit, he got a tattoo. Not just any tattoo. This dude inked a picture of ammunition with the words, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" across his body. Talk about self-snitching on an Olympic level. That ink alone had detectives rubbing their hands like they were in a Netflix crime doc. And yeah, the police were watching. Hard. They linked Marlo to Boosie fast. They had phone records, jail phone recordings, and even footage that allegedly placed Marlo at Boosie's studio the same night Boyd was killed. Whether it was just art or a coded message, the prosecutors weren't trying to interpret metaphors. They were building a death penalty case. They also pointed to another track, Body Bag, where Boosie allegedly bragged about the murder. Investigators even brought in a forensic IT expert to comb through his studio hard drives. That expert confirmed that the tracks were recorded around the same time Boyd was killed. That was huge. And yet, for all the so-called evidence, the lyrics, the tattoos, the connections, it all came back to one person. Marlo Mike. Without him, the case had no legs. And at first, it looked like he was going to flip on Boosie and send him straight to death row. But then something changed. Out of nowhere, Marlo reversed his statement. He told the court Boosie had nothing to do with Boyd's murder. That switch-up saved Boosie's life. Literally, the prosecution's key witness had just destroyed their entire case on the stand. And just like that, the death penalty went from a near certainty to a memory. Still, you gotta ask, was Marlo Mike really this teenage mastermind killing for cash? Or was he just a lost kid who got caught in the hurricane that surrounded Boosie's fame, street politics, and Baton Rouge's cutthroat underworld? Either way, his part in this saga turned what was once a rap beef into a deadly reality. And from that moment forward, there was no turning back for anyone involved.
As of July 2020, Lil Boosie Hitman appeal was denied. That kid is gonna die in prison. A 16-year-old kid, not an 18-year-old man, but a 16-year-old died in prison because he was a serial killer for Boosie. He killed over 5 people for Lil Boosie.
Now, here's where things got real scary for Boosie. He was already locked up on charges, dealing with a 2-year bid. But that was nothing compared to what came next. While he was in prison, Baton Rouge law enforcement, along with state and federal agents, started digging deep. They were investigating a string of murders across the South Baton Rouge area. And let's just say, they weren't looking at random street beefs anymore.
We're also indicted.
They were building a case, and Boosie's name was front and center. The big accusation that Boosie had ordered the hit on Terry Boyd, using none other than Marlo Mike as his triggerman. That made it a first-degree murder charge. And you know what comes with that? Yeah, the death penalty. They weren't playing. They were trying to take Boosie's life over what they believed he rapped about. Now picture this. You're already sitting in a cell, away from your family, your kids, your career. And then you find out that the court system is literally using your own music to try to kill you. That's exactly what happened. The prosecution pulled out lyrics from Boosie's tracks like it was a playlist built for court. They brought up 187. Body Bag, and In Trouble, and Limelight. In all those tracks, Boosie talked about death, revenge, money on people's heads, and Marlo Mike being hungry for a body. To the streets, that's regular rap talk. To the courtroom, that sounded like premeditated murder. Now, if you line that up with the fact that Marlo Mike had confessed to a handful of killings during that same timeline, you can start to see how the prosecution was drawing a straight line between lyrics and life. They even called in a forensic IT specialist, a dude named Constantino Dimitarellos. This wasn't just some computer geek. This guy seized Boosie's hard drives, combed through his audio files, timestamps, and metadata, and confirmed that some of these tracks, including Body Bag, were recorded on or near the same night Terry Boyd was killed. It didn't stop there. On In Trouble, Boosie rapped, "I'll kill you with my money. I got some killers on my payroll." That line alone had prosecutors grinning like they had the case in the bag. Then there was Limelight, a track featuring Hurricane Chris, where Boosie dropped the line, "Marlo Mike up in the back seat, begging for a body." The courtroom wasn't trying to hear about metaphors. They saw this as a direct confession. And when you mix that with Marlo Mike's early statement that Boosie paid him $2,800 to do the hit, that's a recipe for a death sentence. Oh, and don't forget the cherry on top. That infamous tattoo Marlo Mike got after the murder. The one that read, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" You can't make this up. It was like the prosecution had a whole script written by a Hollywood screenwriter. They had the shooter, they had lyrics, they had forensic proof, they had motive. What they needed now was a conviction. But through all this, Boosie stayed solid. Even while locked up, he wasn't folding, he wasn't breaking. His legal team was working overtime. But Boosie was prepared to go out like a soldier if he had to. And just when it looked like the end was near, everything changed. Marlo Mike pulled the ultimate twist. He recanted his entire confession. He got on the stand and told the courtroom under oath that Boosie had nothing to do with the hit on Terry Boyd. Just like that, the prosecution's main witness became their biggest problem. The case crumbled. And Boosie, he walked away not guilty. It wasn't just a win, it was a miracle. The death penalty was off the table. The bars didn't kill him, the streets didn't kill him, and the court system, which had already started carving his name in a tombstone, had no choice but to let him go. But make no mistake, that trial left a permanent scar. Because from that point on, one thing was clear. Rap lyrics were no longer just lyrics. They could be used in court, twisted into evidence, and held against you in a fight for your life. Boosie beat the case, but he never forgot the war.
And jury has indicted Torrance Hatch, otherwise known as Lil Boosie, on first-degree murder charges. Lil Boosie was indicted in the October 21st shooting death of Terry Boyd. Boosie and a girlfriend along with a...
Let's talk about Chris Nussie Jackson, the man whose name still echoes in Baton Rouge streets like a ghost that refuses to rest. Now, if you're from Louisiana, especially BR, you already know what it was between Nussie and Boosie. This wasn't no industry beef, no made-up drama for YouTube clout. This was real raw and laced with street politics. At the center, two voices of the trenches, and only one was walking away. See, Nussie was respected, maybe even feared, in Baton Rouge. The dude had presence. He was loud, charismatic, and he wasn't afraid to speak his mind, especially about Boosie. And man, did he speak. He called Boosie out in interviews, dropped diss tracks, questioned his street credentials, and he wasn't subtle. You could feel the tension in the air. Everybody in the hood knew something was gonna give. Boosie wasn't the type to let that kind of disrespect slide, and Nussie wasn't the type to back down. It was a ticking time bomb. Now remember earlier when we mentioned that bar Boosie rapped, "A nah tried to kill me. After that, a nah stole my name." Yeah, that wasn't a mystery. He was talking about Nussie. See, Nussie was calling himself Nussie Badazz, mocking Boosie's name, throwing jabs, and riding with people Boosie wasn't rocking with. In the streets, stuff like that gets real quick. And then, it did. On February 9, 2009, Chris Nussie Jackson was found shot in the head, murdered in cold blood in Baton Rouge. No camera, no witnesses, just a body and a lot of rumors. Now here's where things got icy.
The man known as the streets of Nussie was shot dead in Baton Rouge. Police say Chris Jackson, known by his rap name as Nussie, was murdered last night in the Mid-City area of Baton Rouge.
His body was found on America Street. No known shooter or motive.
Rumors started swirling that Boosie had put a $30,000 bounty on Nussie's head, that he had paid none other than Marlo Mike to handle it. And just like the Boyd case, Boosie's name got dragged right back into the center of a homicide investigation. Was it proven? No. Boosie was never charged with Nussie's murder, but in FBI files, Boosie's name was allegedly listed as a prime suspect. Think about that. The feds had eyes on him, believing he was behind not one but multiple murders, with a teenager as his personal shooter. But here's the wildest part. Right before his death, Nussie gave a few interviews where he talked about the beef. Not on some I'm scared stuff, nah, on some I'm ready for whatever vibe. He even said the beef with Boosie was just a misunderstanding at first, but then the streets took over and it spiraled.
The bad album I dropped. Well, it didn't really start from that. That's where the streets started pushing it from, you know, bad.
Boosie album cover, took him all, put me on it, and I did it. But once you listen to the album, I had no diss. It wasn't a diss record. It just was something I wanted to just be different, be exclusive, you know. A lot of people took it the wrong way. A lot of people understood.
One of his last interviews, he looked straight at the camera and said, "It ain't no beef like that, but if it is, then let it be that." That aged chillingly. Boosie, for his part, never directly admitted anything. But he did diss Nussie after death, saying in a Vlad TV interview, "It's F you while you living and dead." That tells you everything you need to know about how deep the wounds went. Now think about this. Between Boyd, Nussie, and a handful of others tied to Boosie's circle, law enforcement was building a theory that Boosie had created a mini death squad using Marlo Mike to silence enemies, settle scores, and clear the way for his dominance in BR. It sounds like a movie plot, but to the feds, it was a case. Problem is, even with all the speculation, they couldn't stick Nussie's death to Boosie. No weapon, no direct evidence, just a trail of lyrics, beefs, bodies, and one kid, Marlo Mike, who was flipping stories like pancakes. But still, the streets remember. Because the Nussie-Boosie beef wasn't just two rappers throwing jabs on wax. It was a story of how music in Baton Rouge crossed a line into homicide, and how a city ended up holding its breath every time another diss track dropped. And for Boosie, Nussie's death wasn't the end of his problems. It was the beginning of a storm that nearly ended his life. Death row ain't just a sentence. How Boosie beat the odds. When Boosie got hit with that first-degree murder charge, everything shifted. The feds said he ordered a hit on rival Terry Boyd using 16-year-old Marlo Mike. They brought up lyrics, studio timestamps, even a tattoo Marlo got saying, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" It looked like a rap.
Did they talk about the tattoo?
Yeah.
In court? So apparently Mike has a tattoo that says, "Yo Boosie, who next?"
Yeah.
But when trial came, Marlo switched up, telling the court Boosie had nothing to do with it. No weapon, no real evidence, no star witness.
Very hard to get over that
yeah.
belt.
Yeah. And with Lowe, I don't think he had a witness on none of his cases against him.
So it's just him.
Yeah.
In 2012, Boosie beat the murder charge. Death row dodged. The streets were still talking, the pressure was still heavy, but Boosie wasn't done yet. Not even close. Boosie's legal team held strong. They pushed back against prosecutors who tried to treat his lyrics like confessions and painted the entire case as a stretch. A rap artist being punished for storytelling. The jury agreed. When the not guilty verdict hit, the courtroom erupted. For Boosie, it wasn't just a legal win. It was survival. A man who'd once been one verdict away from execution walked out of that courtroom alive. But even with death row off the table, Boosie still wasn't free. He had time left on his case, plus the constant weight of street rumors and media heat. He stayed focused, stayed quiet, and started plotting his return. Beating the case didn't erase the war scars, but it reminded the world. Boosie wasn't built to break. When Boosie beat that murder charge in 2012, it wasn't just a courtroom victory. It was the start of his rebirth. Still behind bars, but more focused than ever, he used the time to sharpen his mind, earn his GED, and plan his comeback.
Video here. Boosie, what can you say about the charges being dropped?
By March 2014, Boosie walked out of Angola prison with a new name, Boosie Badazz, and a new mission: Signed to Atlantic, he dropped Touchdown to Cause Hell, launched Badazz Entertainment, and proved he wasn't done yet.
I'm on your kidneys. So I'm like, what y'all found on my kidneys? So I'm sitting in there like 6-7 hours. So doctor come back like, you got cancer in your kidney.
Health-wise, how are you at the moment?
Oh, I'm perfect. I'm more healthy than I ever been. You know, I'm more healthy. I might drink a beer every once in a while. I don't do no drugs. Don't drink no alcohol, really.
He even beat cancer just months later. From street legend to CEO, Boosie turned every loss into fuel. Now, he's not just surviving, he's winning. And that's the real, straight from the source. Boosie's story ain't just about rap. It's about survival, loyalty, and beating the odds when the world counted you out. Appreciate y'all for tapping in. Don't forget to like, comment, and let me know what story you want next. See you soon. Stay real.